I had to break the news to a spirit that they were dead, and I cried for him. Posted by I Cut My Lip. I ghost hunt at the Mansfield Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio a lot. In the fall of 2019, I had discovered someone lingering in the east showers. No one had known about him, so I kept him a secret for a bit. We got really close and I learned some things about him, and he's visited me at home, which isn't a problem for me, mind you. I use my pendulum to speak to him. Months later, on another hunt, we discovered that he was being abused and was very badly hurt. He was hiding in a corner scared for his life, so my father helped him out and escorted him to the hospital to get checked out. We went up a couple of hours later, and he felt safe there, so we encouraged him to stay. After this happened, that's when I started to tell people of his existence and inform them of what had happened to him. When I first met him, I had found out that he didn't know he was dead. I felt like it wasn't my place to tell, and if it ever did become my place to tell, I knew that it was too soon. June 2020 rolls around. I invited some friends along with my dad to help me speak to him because I knew there was something that had to be talked about. Up in the hospital, another spirit had been harassing him and telling him what to do, and he couldn't escape it. My dad was helping him understand that he doesn't have to listen to this guy, especially because he has no superiority over him. He was basically just a guy who was trolling him. My dad started slowly easing into it, asking him how it's possible that he hasn't eaten in a while, explaining to him that he's able to go through walls and leave rooms whenever he wants, telling him that he can leave whenever his troll is harassing him. My anxiety and intuition started to raise, but the anxiety wasn't my own. I knew that straight away. Something was telling me that he was nervous about what my dad was saying to him. I ended up taking over and explaining how we're all dressed differently, how we're all wearing masks because of a pandemic because it's 2020, not the 1890s. I said, "Do you know where I'm getting at?" And my pendulum responded with, "Yes." And right after that, I could feel tears coming, and I said, "I can't do it." I couldn't tell him he was dead, but he already knew. I started crying really hard, and I felt a huge pang in my chest, the kind of pang you feel when you've just been told a loved one had died. And I knew I wasn't crying. It was him crying. I have never felt another's emotions before, and the pain I felt, I knew was his, and so did everyone else who witnessed that. A friend who took an audio recording of the session told me she heard a male voice say, "dead," after I asked if he knew where I was getting at. And when she played it for me, I heard it too, and we knew it was him. I cried for a good couple of minutes and was telling my dad how heartbroken he was to hear that. It was very hard for both of us, but eventually he grew to accept it. Ever since then, I have become sensitive and can sometimes feel the emotions of the spirits I speak to. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's not there. It was one hell of an experience, but I love him to death and hope I never lose him. That's how close we have become. I was told we have a special connection, and I don't doubt it because I feel it. Anyways, thanks for listening to my experience. I've been wanting to share it somewhere. Working nights in an old prison. Posted by the Sweaty Sock. So I work in a prison in the UK. I always like to work nights because you do 7 days on, 7 days off. Whilst on nights, I get locked onto a wing with no keys. We have a sealed pouch with a cell key inside for emergencies, if someone is hanging and I need to get in to cut them down, etc. I'm in charge of looking after 200 plus prisoners. After a busy few hours, the landings, answering cell bells, and doing my checks on people who are essentially on suicide watch, the wing starts to settle down. And through the night, I do multiple patrols. During these patrols, I've witnessed so many bizarre things. Here are just in a very small portion of things that have happened to me whilst on nights. One night, I was on the 3's landing doing my checks. I heard a loud bang coming from the 1's landing outside the servery. When I went to investigate, there was a broom on the floor. When I reviewed the CCTV footage, you can see the broom slowly being lifted away from the wall it was resting on and then quickly getting thrown to the ground. We have the footage burned off, and most of the people at work have seen it. We usually show it to new staff before they do their first night shift to freak them out. 2. One night, we had someone overdose. He was located in cell 2-37. I was working the week after all this had happened, and the cell was locked off for police investigation and was empty. At about 3:30 a.m., the cell bell for 2-37 was pressed. At first, I didn't even know that this cell belonged to the guy that had died the previous week. But as soon as I looked into the empty cell, I realized and just froze. It takes a lot to freak me out, but I didn't walk back on that part of the landing until roll count 3. There are some more minor, but still equally as creepy things that happened just last week that prompted me to share this. While walking the 3's landing, one of the showers on the 2's turned on by itself. The only way to turn it on is to press a button on the wall inside the shower. I went to investigate, and the showers were locked and lights inside turned off. This was about 2:30 a.m. Approximately 30 minutes later, I was walking down the 2's landing and an office door slammed shut. I checked the landing for open windows and they were all shut. Again, every time I hear a noise, I always investigate and love anything creepy, but this sent shivers down my spine. I've got so many more bizarre things that have happened to me, and I've heard some creepy stories from colleagues too that I could share in the future. Also, I apologize for the grammar mistakes. I didn't expect this to blow up as much as it has. Thank you so much for reading. Unfortunately, I cannot share the footage of the broom due to it being filmed inside of a prison. Venetian boy told me about his death in a dream. Husband saw his ghost. Posted by Una Vida Salvaje. My husband and I visited Venice about 2 years ago. Our first day there, we pretty much went right to bed as we got there late. That night, I woke up to my husband sweating profusely and staring at the corner of our room. I tried talking to him, but he wouldn't answer. I shook him awake, even though his eyes were open. And he told me that he saw a little boy in the corner of our room walking towards him. He was trying to scream, but he couldn't. The little boy disappeared as soon as I started shaking my husband. Not sure whether he just saw a ghost or had a bad dream, we just went back to sleep. I started having a dream about a little Venetian boy. He started walking towards me and whispered in my ear in Italian about how he died. I couldn't understand everything he was saying, as I speak fluent Spanish and very little Italian. So he decided to show me how the bad men cut his tongue out of his mouth and took his teeth. He told me he wasn't alone, and they were doing this to other people too. When I woke up, I told my husband about what the little boy had said and shown me. My husband's eyes immediately went wide when I told him about the tongues and teeth. He told me that when the little boy was walking towards him earlier, he was holding a bag full of tongues and another one with teeth. But he didn't tell me about that before because he didn't want to scare me. My husband is a huge skeptic and always said he didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. But after this experience, he is convinced that we were both visited by the spirit of the same little boy. Drowning in Blood, posted by Blue Ink. My grandfather is 100 years old. His mind is as sharp as ever, but his body is sadly not keeping up, although he still lives independently. I go round to his house a lot and he tells me stories about the old days. Recently, he told me a story that stuck in my mind, so I thought I'd share. For context, my grandfather is a no-nonsense atheist sort and not spiritual at all. He has had so many near-death experiences, he probably does have someone looking out for him from above, but that isn't enough to make him believe in religion or anything like that. My grandfather told me that some years ago he went to sleep and had an incredibly vivid dream that his younger sister had drowned in a bath full of blood. He woke the next day to the news that his sister had died suddenly in her sleep from a blood clot to the brain. She hadn't been ill before, so it was a shock. My grandfather and his sister were in their 40s at the time. My grandfather said he didn't tell anyone about his premonition at the time, but the dream has, understandably, stuck with him ever since. I found this particularly interesting, coming from someone avowedly non-spiritual. Has anyone else had any experience like this? My First Encounter, posted by the_mini_malcavian. When I was young, around 5 or 6, I had a TV in my room that I kept on at night for the light and music. One night, I jerked awake and couldn't move. There was something standing at the foot of my bed. It looked like a tall, broad-shouldered man with bright red eyes and a wide-brimmed hat. Everything else was dark, like a shadow person, so there weren't any discernible details like clothing. I was terrified. The being stepped closer, wrapped his hand around my ankle and said, "You're mine," before vanishing. As soon as he disappeared, the TV switched off and then back on to static, and my VCR crashed onto the floor. I flipped the light on and ran through the house to my parents' room. My mom came and checked it out and tried to calm me down. She unplugged the TV and plugged it back in to try and reset it, but it wouldn't come back on. She tried again, and the static started again. But this time it was while the TV was unplugged. It lasted about 5 minutes and then shut off. I slept with my parents that night. I still see this being, almost 20 years later.